This video is brought to you by Company Cam. Snap, sync, store, and share. It's as simple as that to organize your HVAC company. Find out more at companycam.com. I thought about all the, and it's funny because I was an installer. I thought about all the ways that I thought of installers, how they were like, they were the stepping stone to get to service. And they were like a more remedial career compared to service. And service techs were cool and drove like convertibles and were awesome. And installers, like, I don't know, emptied the porta potty at the end of each day. And that's, and I kind of forgot about all the things that they had to be capable of. And your first point was vision on your in your article. You're talking about vision. You have to be able to envision a job and all the different components. Now kind of lay out what you were talking about and we'll expand on it.
Yeah, well, with vision, I mean, especially on new construction, and even this goes on in retrofit. Anytime you're doing equipment upgrades, great installers have to see the job before it ever goes in. They have to predict cause and effect relationships on a job. If I take this out, how am I going to put it back? We did a lot of new construction when I was going out and doing this, and the guys could go into a basement or an attic, and I mean, they could describe how this system was going to lay out, and I mean, I could see it through their descriptions. And that's where really the vision part came from, because they created a visual goal on what we were working to achieve, things that we were aiming for. So even though there was just, boxes full of takeoffs and boots and there'd be pipe, leaning up against the wall and ductwork, we had to assemble all those components. And unless you had a plan and some vision for how it was all going to tie together, there's no telling what it could have turned into. So that was one of the first things that the guys really taught me, was that to be able to look past what you're really seeing and see what could be instead of what's there. And that vision thing, that aspect, I think, is really important in our industry. And one of the biggest reasons I think installers are one of the unsung heroes, as you mentioned, in our industry, is because they got to see things before they happen. And then if something goes wrong, they have to be able to adapt to that. So that vision component is really important. The bigger the job, the bigger the vision. And with that also comes purpose. They understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So many times installers, they just, as you mentioned, they're guys call, and I've heard this term, and it makes me want to puke anytime I hear it, is duct monkeys. The installers in our industry, they're the ones that determine true system performance. Once we started measuring airflow and we started looking at performance, it really drove home to me how important the installers were. They determine how well a system operates. We give a lot of lip service to it in our industry. Install the ducts right, yeah. Use all the ACA manuals and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes time for the rubber to meet the road and you measure and you're verifying that work's done, that's when you start to see the real installers from the guys who are just posers. And measurements are what creates that transparency. And if you got an installer that has no vision, they're just out there slapping stuff together. They have no idea where anything's going. And this happens to a lot of guys, unfortunately. They're a helper for a couple of weeks. They're thrown into a truck, and then they're told to run a job. And they don't even have enough experience to know what the vision is. So, I mean, it's a bad way that many guys get put into that situation. But the guys that are good at it and love it, they can see these situations. Going through airports, I'm often, I do this. I'm always looking up at the ducts. And to see the way that those ducts look and the way that they're uniform and turned, their work's art, man. Mechanical art.
Yeah, I've noticed that throughout the trades, no matter if it's HVAC, electrical, carpentry, whatever, you'll see that the best installers seem to be the ones that are aesthetically minded. You'll see electrical conduit all bent in unison. And you could tell that the guy had made sure that every bend was equidistant from the next bend, even though it had no effect on performance. That attention to detail. And my dad always said this. He said, if it looks good, it works good. That's what he would tell us. If it looks good, it works good. And theoretically, that's not necessarily true. But I guess the theory is that the person that's detail-oriented enough to make the look good is going to make the work good as well.
That's a lot of that vision part of it. And that also ties into one of the other traits I know you're going to talk about, and that's craftsmanship.
Oh, yes. Craftsmanship is, and that goes right back to my image of installers. In fact, we'll transfer over to craftsmanship in just a second. But I never envisioned installers, speaking of envisioned them as craftsmen, even when I was one, and I was taking my time and trying to, and not when I first started, when I didn't know what was going on, but when I actually would do like you're saying, you would see the duct system in place, you would see where the air handler was going to go, where the furnace and coil was going to go. You picture it in your mind, you take the time to draw it out, draw out every bit of it, you do how many CFM you thought was going to go to each run or plan it out that way. And you
that's
didn't
another
realize,
show.
Oh yeah, it's hey, we should do that too. Actually, part 2 coming up next week. Yeah, the craftsmanship of it, just everything being put in. And my father was another great example of this. And he's no service tech. My father would not be able to service anything. He doesn't know anything about service, but every single screw on the duct was equidistant from the next screw. Every single S-slot, S and drive was perfectly straight, and it worked good too. And so, I mean, it's true. If you take the time to make it look good, it is going to work good. And it is craftsmanship and artwork, like you're saying. I mean,
it says a lot about that. Number one, it says that you care. I know we talk a lot about our dads. And my dad said he used to actually have us put our initials inside the ducts. He would say, if you won't sign your system, he said, it's not worth putting in. He said, you need to be proud of it. People need to know who put it in. And still to this day, I've gotten comments from contractors saying, we can tell that you guys put that in, because there's other, guys that are going out, and of course they're doing equipment replacements on systems that we put in when I was a contractor, and they're going back out and they're like, we could tell you guys put it in. Nobody else did stuff like that. Radius throat and heel L's and stuff like that. And the way that we built because we did it. My dad was a sheet metal guy like yours, and that was one of the things that he took a great amount of pride in. And the way that things looked, everything had to be in order, nice, straight, neat. And a customer that we used to have, we did a ground source heat pump for him. He made a statement I'll never forget. He said, I don't know HVAC or heating and cooling. I don't know electrical. I don't know plumbing. He said, but I do know sloppy and I do know neat.
That's absolutely right. That's right on the button, because that is the perception that an outsider will have. They're not going to have a perception like, hey, man, you used 1.8 in there. Shouldn't there be 3 6s or something like that? They're not going to say that. They're going to say, hey, man, your duct's on the ground. Or is that much flux really legal or something like that? And you're right. If they look outside, and the condenser is a great example, because condenser is like the focal point of the system a lot of times, where people can actually see something in place, especially in the South, without the basements and stuff. And to see something that's not level, that's not square, and every copper bend is sloppy, and the previous dryer's still in it, and stuff like that. I mean, anybody with eyes can tell that's bad.
Yeah.
And start to question other things. And that same customer, and let me know what you think of this, that same customer who sees that is more likely to think that slight thing that they might feel is a problem. Like they go inside and say, this room's colder, I think. But if the system's beautiful, maybe be like, okay, maybe it's just something going on in the house.
Yep.
But if other way, they might say, oh, I think we need to call these guys back out and tick them off today.
Yep. Oh, you've created doubt in that customer's mind.
Absolutely.
And it's not only the job, how it looks. I mean, it also ties back to personal appearance. I know it's shallow, but our customers base us on how we look. If you go out on a job and you're I know we work in bad environments, guys. I mean, I've got rafter knees. I've had cellulose up my nose and, soot underneath my fingers. I've been there. I know that. But you can still take pride in how you look. If you're bent over putting a piece of duct together and half of your crack's hanging out, people notice that stuff. They'll never say anything, but they notice it. And it shows, it's a reflection on how we look in our industry. We want to be paid like doctors and lawyers. We got to start taking not their bad practices, but their good practices and putting them into, and start to implement them. Looking like a professional when we go out to do these things. And that's part of being a craftsman.
Absolutely. One of the questions I had written down whenever I was reading through your article is what is wrong with a functional yet unattractive system? And you sort of answered it right there. When it's perfectly fine, you have a 3-ton system, it's working beautifully, you're getting the proper split, everything's charged perfectly, but it's just out of square in the crawl space. The unit's out of square, not in the way that it's going to cause any issues, just in the way that it visually, it's like almost like what's the word for it? Like an aberration. Like you look at it, it's like this doesn't sit well with me just seeing it like this. So in the end, what's the problem with it? I mean, everything works.
Yeah, they're two different things. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. We've all heard that. And what looks good to me may look horrible to someone else. So I think this is where you have to define what it looks like and whether you're happy with it or not. Everybody's going to be a little bit different in what they prefer. When it comes to performance, the measurements are what tells the tale. And this is one of the hardest things I had to get past because I liked everything to look neat. I was very picky and a perfectionist. And by the way, for those of you that think perfectionism is a good thing, it's not, it's a curse. I was a perfectionist. And one of the things I would do, I wanted everything to look just right, even though my measurement said, hey, this part of the duct system is working okay. You can leave it alone. Focus on this part. That wasn't good enough for me because it didn't look just right. And what I started doing was my perfectionism started to bleed over into my customer's pocketbook. And in some instances, I was actually pricing myself out of jobs because I was letting my hangups affect things that they didn't care about. Now, if they cared about it, that's different. But the physical, the appearance aspects of it, and then the performance aspects of it are two totally different sides. Because I have seen some systems that were horrible looking. They tested awesome. I have seen some that were designed by engineers. These things were works of art. And the actual delivered capacity was less than 50% on some of these systems. Looked great, performed horribly.